Hi, I'm Tracy, VE3TWM. Thank you for tuning in to Outdoors on the Air. Got a little bit of a story I want to tell you here. I walked into Radio World. Now that is Canada's leading amateur radio store located in Toronto. And I got talking to one of the staff in there, and he was raving about a small little wee vertical antenna for the HF bands that he used apparently very successfully with his Yaesu FT817. I was intrigued, of course, being an 817 fan and also being somebody who is extremely skeptical when it comes to the topic of compromised low to the ground HF antennas. So we got talking and he convinced me to give it a try. Now I didn't buy it at the store. I actually waited until I saw one come up for sale on a used flea market, online flea market. It had been purchased by somebody who had never used it, never out of the wrapper, and guess what? It's in here. Yes, an HF antenna which is spec'd to operate from 160 meters, if you can believe it, to up to 10. And this is it. This is the Comet, let me see if I get this name straight, HFJ-360M Toybox. Now this product is also sold, I believe, just as the 350M, but without the 160 meter add-on. I'm intrigued by the name Toybox. Now, a couple of things are actually fascinating to me about this. Number one, it's a reputable brand, Comet. I mean, I've got a Comet dual band antenna up on my tower at home, which is a very nice antenna, has worked very well for me. I've used Comet mobile antennas. They seem to be very well made. It seems to be a reputable manufacturer. So I'm curious that they would actually put their name on a product like this. So that's part of the appeal. The other part of the interest for me comes in, you know, I know what this is. I know this is and this one fully extended, assembled and extended, is no more than 4 feet tall. I know that that's a terrible antenna. And I go into this with both eyes wide open. It is what it is. The Toybox name kind of gives me that, oh, okay, all right, even the manufacturer themselves isn't taking it completely seriously. But also, actually, let's consider the price. Now, the price on this thing, this is not a cheap antenna. It sells for a little under $200 Canadian. So I imagine that's somewhere just north of $100 US. That's a lot of money for a seriously compromised antenna. What I got to thinking about was not, okay, is this actually going to work? That thought has never entered my mind. My thinking is, can I make it work? Can I give it the best possible chance to succeed? And that's what today's video is about. So there it is. The preamble is out of the way. You know what you're in for. Let's see what I can get done with this. Okay, let's take a look at the bits and pieces of this thing. So there are 4 components to it, and just an FYI, I have put a right angle connector on this. That doesn't belong there. That did not come with the kit. This is the base unit here, and I'm just going to remove the right angle just so you can see the product as it comes. Okay. Now, on the bottom of the antenna, you have a typical PL259. And that is, it's a well-made product. This is a solid piece of gear, no doubt about it. Comet came through on that. Now, If any of you are familiar with the old Outbacker mobile antennas, they were mobile antennas, and I think they were about 8 feet long or something like that. And rather than be all bands, literally just sit up front with a tuner, they had a jumper that you would get out of the car, you would switch bands, and then you'd get back in your car and you'd operate the band. It's the same idea here. And by the way, you're going to see a white zip tie here. So I put that on there. Part of the kit is this little cable, this very narrow cable here, which is a jumper. And take a look at the size of this banana plug. I mean, it is really, really tiny. This is a non-standard banana plug, and this is my first criticism of the unit, is that if you lose this cable, you've pretty much lost the ability to use this antenna, because I don't know where you're going to find something like this unless you jury rig something. And I don't know. I think Comet could have gone with a standard banana connector, and at the expense of a little bit bigger size. I certainly would have suggested that to them, but that's me. So be careful, don't lose it. That's why I've got this zip tied here. So each of these taps are for different bands. Now, I have seen some YouTube videos where guys have taken these, and their unit actually has markings as to which band you plug the jumper into to access that band. There's nothing on this one. So thank you, Comet. Don't know why you changed that up, but there's a criticism for you right there. That means I have to have either a good enough memory to remember what goes where when I switch bands, or I'm going to need to keep the manual handy. It's not a big manual, it's a couple pages, but to me that's a fail. Okay, so that's the base of the antenna. This big chunk down here, this is the 160 meter resonate. So you only use this one. You only use this piece if you're actually going to operate on 160 meters. Today, I'm not going to be operating 160 meters. To me, that's kind of like, I don't know, Don Quixote, I guess. The next piece is for 80 meters, and I won't be using 80 meters today. I'm going to try 40 and maybe 20 if 20 is open. And the way you would use this is that you start with the base unit, which has the PL259 at the bottom. That's where your coax is going to go, your antenna mount and coax. You would take the add-on and you would just screw it on like so, and that would get you into resonance on the 80 meter band. Now, I use the term "get you onto resonance" in a loose fashion, because here you have a telescopic whip. Now, this telescopic whip is, if I'm just setting it on the ground, you can't see it on the camera, but it comes up to about my, just about my elbow. So this might be about 4 feet long right here. Okay, this is not a long whip. You know, you see guys using 17-foot whips and they're running counterpoises. That's not what this is at all. So the maximum length of this antenna, let's say you had a 160 meter coil on there, is probably going to be somewhere around, I don't know, 5 feet maybe. So let's say you want to operate 40 meters or any of the higher bands. This is what you've got. You've got your base unit. There's the PL259 connection at the bottom. Here's the fully extended whip, and just to give you an idea, so I'm going to rest it on the ground beside me, and here is where the whip comes to. So, you know, I'm 6 feet tall, so yeah, that might be, I don't know, 5 feet or something like that. So this is an extremely compromised antenna from an HF perspective. You know, I don't care what anybody tells you. You know, the amount of time it takes me to put up a dipole for 40 meters or 20 meters versus fooling around with one of these and making a whole lot more contacts on the dipole. You know, it's a non-starter. This is a compromise antenna. Now listen, we are heading into the solar maximum, and it's very possible that we're going to have some days where an antenna like this will literally let you work the world. Cool, but there's an awful lot of years between those solar maximums where this is just going to sit in somebody's closet. Now I want to point out something else to you. I mean, Comet, they're not complete dummies, okay? And I'm sorry if I offended anybody by saying that. They're not complete dummies. I'm not sure this is a wonderful product. Hey, I'm going to put it to the test. They did understand that, you know, you might want to use a counterpoise with this antenna. And certainly the instructions indicate the use of a counterpoise. Now I mentioned earlier about these little wee banana plugs, these ridiculously tiny banana plugs. Here's something that's even worse. At the base of the unit here, there is a counterpoise terminal. This is very, very small, has an extremely small screw attached to it. This is janky. This is very dodgy in my estimation. This is no way to attach a counterpoise. You lose that screw, you know, what are you going to do? This is just I don't know what they were thinking. And then again, you know, when you're in the field, stuff gets handled roughly. It just does. I mean, I try my best to take care of my stuff, but you can't get around it, and it's subject to all kinds of conditions. This is not worthy of being a solid counterpoise connector. Okay, one more note with regard to the whip here is that, you know, you just can't extend your whip and pop it on your SO239 and away you go. The whip is telescopic not just for a practicality in transporting and making it a small package, but also because you need to tune it. It will, you're going to need to pull it up and push it down. Now, take a look at the whip here. The whip is, you know, when I was growing up, they had CB walkie-talkies. And invariably, they had telescopic whips like this on. And invariably, those walkie-talkies would be thrown out. Why? Not because the radios weren't working, but because the kids broke the antennas. These things are fragile. You really do need to take some care when you're extending and retracting the antenna. So there's that. Okay, we had a look at the antenna itself. And I've expressed my disdain for the counterpoise connector, and there's no doubt in my mind. And I know some guys have used these things hooked up to the back of their 817, hence the right angle adapter that I had there. I did plug it in just to see if I could hear something. That's not how I'm going to be using it. So I alluded earlier to the fact that I want to give this antenna the benefit of the doubt, and I want to set it up in such a way that gives it the best possible chance to succeed. So I'm out here today in a parking lot. Now, fortunately, this is a little used parking lot, and you'll see why that's fortunate in just a minute here. I'm actually going to use my vehicle as a base station. What I mean by that is I'm going to set up the antenna utilizing the car as something of a ground plane, but I've added something. Now let me show you what I've done. Okay, I showed you the antenna with the PL259 on the bottom. Yeah, I gave this some thought. I got the antenna. I didn't just run out right away and try to make a bunch of contacts. I'm thinking again, how do I give this thing a chance to succeed? So I thought, okay, it's got a PL259 at the bottom. How do I easily, and looking at that ridiculous counterpoise connection, how do I effectively attach a counterpoise to that? Well, I came up with something, and sticking within the Comet family, I bought a magnet mount. And this magnet mount has an SO239 on the top. It comes, of course, with coax cable attached. And I thought, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, now I've got some options. I do have the ability to put this on the roof of a car. Now, you know the way modern cars are these days, there's so many composite materials moved. Maybe your car has some metal in the roof and maybe it doesn't. Fortunately, with my Subaru, it does. It actually sticks there. I thought, okay, so I can use that as a counterpoise of sorts, but maybe I can do something else. So I want to show you something that I jury rigged when I was out in the field with Tom in the winter. I made a trip to the dollar store, and what I was looking for was one of these. This is a serving tray. It's a metal serving tray, and it cost me, I don't know, $1 or $2, I don't know, whatever the case is. They don't even call them dollar stores in Canada anymore. Now it's they're careful. It's $1 or $2 because you can't buy anything for $1 in Canada. I'm just ranting. And what I did is I drilled a hole in the bottom of this serving tray, this metal serving tray. So now I can take my magnet mount and I can affix it to the serving tray. The hole, what does the hole do? Let me show you. The hole is drilled so that it fits the top bolt on a camera tripod. You know, the one that the camera body gets screwed into. And it can just go in like this. And now I can use a nut on the other side to hold the tray on top. So if I am in the field, if I'm not near my car, I've still got a support for the magnet mount. But now it also gives me the ability to attach a counterpoise. All right, I've talked about counterpoises. I've talked about the ridiculous counterpoise connection on it. What am I going to do to attach counterpoises? Oh, and by the way, I won't use this here today because I do have my car and I'm in an empty parking lot. Hopefully it remains that way. I want to show you what I'm going to be using for a counterpoise. Comet sells an accessory product, and this is a really cool product. And I first saw this product on Mike, Kilo 8 MRD's channel. Mike's got a great channel. I'm sure you all know him, but if you don't know him, make sure you look up K8MRD radio stuff. Here is the package that this product came in. This is the CGW560. Now, what this is designed to go over an SO239 connection. It's a ring. Let me show you. So here's my SO239 right on the magnet mount. Here's the ring. So let me just do something like this. The ring goes on the SO239 like this. And it has 6 radials. This is a cool solution. Now, the radials are only 15 feet long. That's not a whole lot of good. If I want to operate on 40 meters, for example, sorry, did I say 15 meters? 15 feet. 15 feet long. If I want to operate on 40 meters, those radials are not long enough. And of course, 40 meters is one of, it's got to be my favorite band for portable operations because it's always open. Sunspots don't really affect it. Propagation is usually really good on it. It is a money band where you don't have to put up a really long antenna as you would on 80. So I thought this is a really cool idea, but I took, understanding that 15 feet isn't a lot for a radial system, I took it an extra step. Let me put some stuff down and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so what I did was I went and bought a 100-foot spool, and I think it was 18 gauge wire, simply because the 16 gauge was double the money to get 100 feet of it. I then cut the 100-foot spool into 6 equivalent length sections, because we've got 6 radials coming off the MFJ counterpoise system here. And then I attached the lengths to my radials. So here, if I show you this, the black wire is the Comet radial, which is part of their counterpoise system, the counterpoise product. The yellow is the 18 gauge wire that I purchased, and here you can see I've got a joint in there that I used to join these. And I'm still playing around with the joints a little bit. I think I'm going to make them. My initial inclination was to make it so I could unplug it and use a special joint to do that. I think I'm going to fix that, and I'm just going to make them as long as they are. I'm just going to make it a solid connection rather than have a connector that can be plugged and unplugged. I don't think you're going to need the shorter length. You might in some situations where you're working the higher bands and the higher bands are open, but you know what, a longer radial is not going to hurt things. So here's what I've got. This is my contraption. I've got 6 radials, which are a little more than 30 feet long each. And now I figure if I put the magnet mount on my car and I attach this to it, and I attach the Toybox antenna on top of that, now I've at least given the antenna a chance to actually work, to actually allow me to make some contacts, which of course is what this is all about. Hey, if you just want a receiving antenna, you don't necessarily have to go to all this. But if you want to make contacts, you have to take care of it. You have to understand that a short antenna, a compromise antenna, low to the ground like this, really compromised, you have to make up for it somehow. Now, this antenna, I haven't mentioned it up till now, is rated for something like 75 or 80 watts. Okay, so you can crank more power through. And Lord knows, you're going to see plenty of guys on YouTube using compromise antennas and high power, because they need the high power because the antenna is compromised. But I'm thinking, with this antenna, you might need the high power and to do something about the compromise, which is what I'm trying to do with the radials here. So I'm going to put the antenna on the car. I'm going to pull out my analyzer. I'm going to try to get it set up for 40 meters and see if I can make some contacts. So I'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, I've got the antenna more or less fully deployed now. All I need to do is adjust the whip. I just wanted to give you an idea of the radials and how they're coming down. And what I did was I used the high visibility yellow for the extensions. Something else that I've done is I put a, let's see if I can find it here. I put a terminal on the end so that I can use a tent peg to peg it out if I want to do so. Now, what I'm learning is the quick release mechanism that I used for the extensions it is causing them to pop out, the pressure, the tension. So I'm just leaving them as is for now. Walk up closer to the car and you can see what I've done. Now, I do not have the radials set up in a circular pattern because I am in a parking lot and I don't want to have the wires extending across the roadway and have somebody drive over top of them, of course. So set up 3 radials on this side of the car, somewhat spread out. Let's just turn the camera around so you can see that. Hopefully you can see the yellow there. It's awfully bright out here, so I'm not seeing much of anything. But I've got them spread out, and I've done the same on the other side of the car. The next thing I have to do now is, let's take a look at the antenna. You can see the whip is fully collapsed. Let me just, sorry about the jerking. The antenna is fully collapsed. I need to pull out the rig expert and take a look at the SWR and adjust the telescopic whip, see if I can get a signal out on 40 meters. One other note on this, ideally, the radials should be raised. Now that would be 6 supports all the way around, and that's a bit more effort and a bit more stuff to bring along. Bearing in mind that one of the selling features of this antenna is rapid deployment. Every time you add on something like that, you're going to slow down the process. So what are you really gaining? And by the way, I'm at the point time-wise here. I've probably been working at this right now for, I don't know, 20-25 minutes, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration because I am doing some filming as well. But I could easily have had one of my telescopic poles and an off-center fed dipole up at 30 or 40 feet by now. Just something to bear in mind. Okay, now that I'm ready to deploy, I love these little strings. They make you look like that little kid with the fake cowboy hat at the carnivals. I don't know. It's a good look for some, I guess. It's time for the instructions. There's a couple of pages of them, but the first thing that I have to figure out, I want to operate on 40 meters. I want to see how it goes on 40. And so you'll remember that I referred back to the jumper cable, and you have to set it per bands. As I read this, it's not 100% clear. It actually gives you the instructions as to where to put the jumper for every band except for 40 meters. Let me see here. It says for 1.8 megahertz, 3.5 megahertz, and 7 megahertz, do not use short plugs. Okay, I guess that's their way of saying don't use the jumper, so I'm not going to use the jumper. And it also gives you, when tuning, so tuning instructions, listen to this. When using the 7 to 50 megahertz band, connect the telescopic element directly to the upper thread of the base coil without using the 3.5 megahertz expansion coil. This is exactly what they're telling me is exactly the way I've got it set up right now. In the case of 7 megahertz, do not use a short plug, but adjust the length by adjusting the length of the telescopic element. I believe I just said there's no instructions in there for 40. I've just been corrected. Apologies. When using other than 7 megahertz, use a short plug. If you want to lower the tuning frequency, stretch the rod element. That makes perfect sense. Longer antenna, lower the frequency. If you want to decrease, shrink the rod element. Shrink the element from the upper narrow part. And that's because the thicker the telescopic whip is, the better it radiates. I might be screwing up my words there, but essentially that's the idea. Since the number of turns of the loading coil is increased by design, the tuning band is narrow, may be difficult to find the tuning frequency. Well, that's why I brought along my rig expert. We're going to find out what that's all like. Okay. SWR, attention, SWR may not fall depending on conditions such as the grounding condition, and I'm on a gravel base here, by the way. It's dirt and gravel because it is a parking lot. In the installation position of the antenna, we recommend using an antenna tuner. Okay, so I did bring an antenna tuner along, but I also want to use the expert, the rig expert, to see if that will help me adjust the whip such that I can get it within the confines of the 40 meter band. If not, then I need to use my antenna tuner. Okay, next step is antenna analysis with the rig expert. Okay, just did a scan with the antenna fully collapsed, and it's showing that we've got a 2-to-1, what is it, a 2-to-1 match at 10 megahertz, 10.86. So clearly I need to extend it. No surprise there. Let me extend it and see how we do. Okay, I've now got 1.83 at 7260. I think at this point it's probably fair to just hook up the radio with the tuner and let's see how I do. Okay, good news. I've got the FT897D plugged in. I've got it plugged into a 30 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. I've got the bolt-on FC30 tuner, and the FC30 is bringing the antenna into resonance down around 7188, which means I should be pretty much clear across the 40 meter band. I am experiencing some noise, some local QRM. Let's go. Oh, there it is. There, you hear that? It's coming on and off, but I don't think that'll keep me from trying to make a few contacts. I'm in a park, but I'm not really, I think I'd be probably stretching things to try to do a POTA activation. But what I will do is I'll try to run around the band, see if I can see somebody calling CQ and go back to them and see if I can get a signal report.
Northwest Connecticut here in the Berkshires. Have a great day. Have a good weekend. Yeah, we got the same game. We got weather tonight and tomorrow. Then it's going to be pretty good. Pretty good days. A few days of stretch. Good weather coming next week. Thanks, Eric. Have a great night. Victor 3 Tango, Whiskey Mike, come on.
Hey, thanks so much. Really appreciate your taking my call. The name here is Tracy Tango Romeo Alpha Charlie Yankee in Burlington, Ontario. I'm sitting out in the middle of a parking lot with a test antenna. Just wondering if you'd give me a signal report, sir.
Tango Whiskey Mike, you there?
QSL. This is Victor Echo 3, Tango Whiskey Mike.
Yes, sir. Name your
Hi, name here is Tracy Tango Romeo Alpha Charlie Yankee in Burlington, Ontario. QSL.
Okay, how's everything up with you up there?
We got a beautiful day. I'm sitting in a parking lot with a test antenna. Just wondering if you could give me a signal report.
You're running about a 5657, a little late today there. Thanks for coming aboard. Everything good up there with you?
Yeah, just enjoying the day. A beautiful summer day. I'm sorry, could I get your name and call, sir?
All right. Have a great day.
7-3. Okay, so I made 2 contacts. Oh, I want to show you something. I made 2 contacts. One on mid-cars, Ashtabula, Ohio, and I did not get that one recorded. I don't know, brain fart, IO error they call them, idiot operator. So I thought the camera was running, it wasn't. The fellow down in Ohio, very nice net controller at mid-cars, gave me a 5.7 report. So that was shocking, frankly. I didn't expect anywhere near that kind of quality report. The second contact that you just heard there through a lot of QRM. Now here I am, I'm standing in a big empty parking lot. There's some maintenance workers over there with weed whackers, but there's something with generating some intermittent hash that's really screwing up the audio. You heard it on the clip. Anyway, he was life and death to hear me. And that was in Connecticut, so I'm grateful to both those, and just a shout out to all those net control operators that give people working in the field a chance to test out their stuff. I really appreciate their efforts. Just one note before I proceed into the talking more about the antenna. I haven't addressed this much. This is a third-party microphone that I use with my Yaesus. It's a company called Technofix. They're out of the UK. They sell and they didn't provide me with this, I bought this. They sell these replacement microphones for Yaesu, ICOM, Kenwood. You just specify which model you want and they'll sell it. And I'm sure it's Chinese stuff. It's worked okay, it's a low-cost option to buying a $100 replacement Yaesu mic, and I've had a number of Yaesu mics where the little clip on the RJ45 is broken, and of course as soon as that happens, the jack will not stay in, and you pretty much have a door paperweight, I guess, until you either replace the cable, and I've had a devil of a time finding cables, replacement cables that I can use. But take a look in the back here. This is a metal plate that they've got for the microphone hanger. While talking to the guy in Ohio, I got an RF burn. Just a small one, but it was enough to let me know, okay, if I'm going to use this sort of setup going forward, I'd better use a line isolator, because there's RF on the shield making its way back to the radio. Having said that, the tuner worked fine. My 3-to-1 tuner, the auto tuner, the FC30, bolted to the side of the 897. People love to slag that tuner, but it had no problem bringing this admittedly incredibly compromised antenna system into resonance once I had the telescopic pole set so that it was resonant within the 40-meter band. So let's talk about the antenna a little bit then. For, you know, when you've got a setup like I do right here, I'm not under any illusion. The ground radials, the counterpoise if you want, it's doing all the work. It's not that little wee 4-foot whip up there. It's probably more like 3.5 right now because it's partially collapsed. So if you don't have these, you're just going to be doing an awful lot of talking into your microphone without any voices coming back to you. I don't recommend this antenna. You know what? There's two ways of looking at it. You have fun with stuff, you buy stuff, you try it out, you learn something. I did. And I love playing around with stuff. This year I've now tried a magnetic resonant loop antenna I was not impressed with, and now this one, not impressed with it. In the same amount of time, in fact probably less, that it took me to set this up today, I can have my 50-foot DX wire mast or my 40-foot spider beam mast and a dipole antenna up at 30 feet. And which one do you think is going to perform better? This is not a trick question. So I don't recommend the product. I don't. Not at all. I don't even. I'm not sure what the market is for it, other than they call it a toy box, and maybe it's nothing more than that. Hey, go out and have fun. Now it's an expensive way to have fun because it's not a cheap end. You can buy a real antenna for less money. Anyway, my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Do you think that this is a good antenna, something that you could see yourself buying and using in the field? There's no wrong answer to this question. There's only my frame of reference and yours, and who am I to say that you're wrong based upon your own interest? I'd love to hear. Oh, by the way, so I was running 70 watts when talking to the guy in Connecticut. I think the antenna is rated for 75 or 80. So I was putting a bunch of power out, more than I normally do. What are your thoughts? What do you think? And if you're running digital modes, by the way, why wouldn't this work? Digital modes don't require much of an antenna or much in the way of power to be able to work. But I think you're going to have to ratchet back your power. You're not going to be able to put out 80 watts or 75 watts into this thing. You're going to want to have it 30 or fewer, just because you don't want to burn the antenna out. But I'd love to know. What are your thoughts? Let me know what you're thinking. Comments below, please. I read them all, respond to as many as I can. But you know the deal. Now it's your turn. Get out of the shack, get outdoors, and get on the air. 7-3 from Tracy, VE3 TWM.